I'll read off your names, but the idea here is that I'm the moderator facilitator, and I'm just going to introduce you, and each of you will have about 10 minutes. We're a little bit behind schedule, so we'll see how that works out. You'll have about 10 minutes to talk about your subject matter area, and then we hope to have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end to field comments through the chat stream. Okay. So again, we have just sort of as I see you here on the screen, we have Sarah Travis. She's from the NDI. That's the National Democratic Institute. Is that right? And then there's also an RDI for the Republican side of the House. She's a political science and I guess a Democratic Party wonk. She's has a master's in political science with a focus on international relations. And again, I won't go into too much of this because you all will do that for yourselves. Just to say that you have a vast amount of experience in the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Middle East on issues including incentive structures, women and youth participation and inclusion, and policy platform reform. Robert Nicolas is the executive director of SADA, the SADA. I know we use these acronyms so much. Say that, Robert, again.
Service and Development Agency of the AME Church.
Right, Service and Development Agency of the AME Church. Robert is a lawyer by training and has worked in project development, I guess, for about almost 4 decades, right?
Right.
I think one of your primary focus areas these days is through SADA, AME SADA, is on trying to build up the health sector in Haiti.
It's one of the 2 key areas.
Also. Okay, so again, you can expand on that, Robert, when you make your presentation.
No problem.
Kechi Achebe is a medical doctor and has a master's in public health and has worked extensively globally in the health field and in the field of international development. And Dr. Achebe, I just have to ask you, are you related to Chinua Achebe, the author?
By marriage, yes.
Oh my gosh! Oh, so we're in the presence of royalty here. My goodness, gosh! Just a couple of years ago, I gifted my wife "Things Fall Apart" just to sort of kind of get her roped into some of the feeling of what it's like to be in hot and sweaty Lagos, Nigeria. Anyways, I really look forward to meeting you someday in person, Madame Achebe, Dr. Madame Achebe. I guess. Dr. Achebe, we talked a little bit earlier, a couple of days ago, and I know from that conversation, including your resume, that you have extensive experience with Save the Children, and especially with Africare in the health space. Our paths never crossed, but it's a small world. Jacqueline Hardware Glin, pleased to meet you. Pleased to chat with you. Thank you for sending me your information.
Thank you for having me.
You have a resume. You have a BS or BA and minor in literature, and you have a diploma.
That is correct, yes.
Beautiful. I wish I had that. Wish I could be you. So you've been working in the program having to do with youth for a good number of years, and you spent a good number of years in the area. I'm getting some feedback here. Can you hear me? Still hear me? Jacqueline has gone off screen, but I think you still hear me.
I can not very well, but I
Okay. I was just saying that you spent extensive periods overseas and you worked in countries like Nigeria, Kenya, Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, and Somalia. Among many other roles you've played in working on development, civil society strengthening, etc. Now you're with BPIA Inc. Development I guess primary institutions in the Washington D.C. area. Also, you've been at the National Democratic Institute at some point, so you and Sarah have something in common. And okay, enough for that. I will now ask each of you to go ahead and give your presentation with maybe a few more words about your own background and experience and how that might relate to what you're going to share with us this evening. If you could hold it to about 10 minutes, that would be great. Sarah, why don't you go first? Can you hear me? I cannot hear you.
Sorry, I was muted to avoid the feedback that everyone's been hearing on the other line. And so, sure, I'll just do a little bit about myself and talk about what I see as kind of trends in international development in terms of democracy and governance support. So to quickly start a bit about myself, my name is Sarah Travis, and I am the Senior Program Officer for Political Party Development at NDI. For those who don't know, NDI and its local partners work to promote openness and accountability in government by building political and civic organizations, safeguarding elections, and promoting citizen participation. We help bring together individuals from democracy actors to help share ideas, knowledge, experiences, and expertise that can better help adapt to the needs of individual countries. And so in terms of what I do in my own capacity, my political party development portfolio includes working with parties in sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, the Caribbean, and I'm also doing some work in Asia. So you can imagine my days are very busy because there's a lot going on in those huge swaths of the world. But in this capacity, I help teams and parties in the development of vibrant and accountable and inclusive multi-party systems that offer citizens a meaningful choice and opportunities for political participation. So this includes helping parties better adapt to ways of fundraising, expanding the role and participation of traditionally marginalized groups, including women, young people, ethnic and religious minorities, people with disabilities, the LGBT community, and so forth. And we really aim to be multi-partisan in our approach, despite our name of being the National Democratic Institute. We work with parties from across the political spectrum. And in terms of who we work with in the party, that's everyone from the very grassroots organizers all the way up to senior party leadership. Before I joined NDI, I worked for the Democratic Party of Illinois, which Leroy mentioned, kind of a Democratic Party hack, and also worked for the House of Representatives. And then prior to going into some hard politics, I worked for civil society in Chicago. But today I wanted to kind of talk to you about the current environment in democracy and governance support, and what we are kind of responding to over the following key themes. The first trend that we're seeing is citizens' low trust in governance and in political parties in particular. We're also seeing large-scale citizen protest, the proliferation of social movements. Of course, COVID-19 is negatively impacting or complicating the political space within which people govern. And then we're also seeing closed and closing political space in what we call authoritarian opportunism. So I'll get into some of those in my remarks just now. In terms of citizens' low trust in government and parties, in both established and emerging democracies, political parties are at the center of what we call a crisis of representation. What does this mean, right? This means that opinion polls cite lower levels of citizen trust. And so we know that political parties should play key roles in democratic governance by representing citizens, aggregating concerns into policies, and vetting, selecting, and influencing political leaders. But around the world, in my work, we see corruption, state capture, and other corrosive influences that are eroding citizens' trust in parties and government, which is kind of fueling this political instability. And citizens expect parties and their government, right, to be responsive to their needs and to carry out the kind of everyday functions of government. But parties are perceived as elite-driven, unresponsive, exclusive, and uncommitted to issues of transparency. Another trend that we're seeing over the past couple of years have been these large-scale citizen-led protests. And these protests have been in response to government corruption, unresponsiveness, and austerity measures. And you can also see kind of growing political transitions, most recently in Ethiopia, Sudan, Algeria, Lebanon, and Iraq. And if you're following the news in West Africa, you'll also know that there was a coup that occurred in Mali last week. And so that's also another political transition that we'll see over the next coming months as discussions between the military and the ECOWAS kind of and start negotiating the process and the roadmap for citizen-led governance. We're also seeing a proliferation of social movements and political movements, some of which appear better to be able to mobilize citizens and their concerns. And some of these groups never really make it to what we call formal political processes in terms of running for office and governing. But others morph into political parties like the En Marche movement in France, Podemos in Spain. There's also a potential political movement that may morph into a political party in Haiti called Nous Pas Domi, and Servant of the People in Ukraine. But whether they remain outside of formal politics or not, these groups have a lot of momentum, and even more so probably than political parties. In addition, we're also seeing restricted or closing space, meaning where places where parties are so marginalized that they don't appear to be worth engaging either by the international community or to citizens themselves. And in places like this, that includes Belarus, Jordan, Morocco. And then further, COVID-19, right, has complicated the political space where governments are really taking advantage of the pandemic to squash political dissent and citizen organizing. And this kind of newer theme is what we call authoritarian opportunism. It's understandable right now that citizens are looking toward their government for protection and reassurance, that are often willing to grant governments with extraordinary powers, right, for protection against COVID-19. And in every single continent, so really around the world, we see that authoritarian opportunism has been on full display. Ambitious leaders are seeking to take advantage of the crisis to grab more power and to sideline democratic institutions. And so if you look at China, take the China example, Hong Kong has been in the news for quite some time now. There's been a new national security legislation that just passed in Hong Kong, making it a crime to undermine the power or the authority of the central Chinese government. So really what that means is it's now illegal in Hong Kong to protest, and it's illegal in Hong Kong to vote for opposition political parties, right? This is very, very concerning. But we also see kind of on the other side of authoritarian opportunism in places like Zambia and Southern Africa, where the government has a set number, let's say 50 people, that is allowed to gather outdoors, right, per COVID policies, but the government is actually restricting opposition parties who want to organize, let's say 30, right, individuals for political purposes. And so we're seeing a kind of restricted legal space in places like Zambia that may not be as straightforward as we see in China. So given these trends, these kind of big things that is happening right now in democracy and governance work around the world. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to kind of move on. And my hope is that maybe, depending on the number of queries we get at the end through the chat, maybe we can circle back and you guys can add additional comments. I mean, clearly we could spend a couple of hours just on that one topic. Sure. You're covering by it. So, but let's go on to Robert Nicolas and see if we can do Robert for about 10 minutes or so. Again, we're going to be a little bit pinched. Works. Maybe we a little bit. Some people have other things to do this evening, like the convention and whatnot. But if we can, so Robert, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. As Leroy has said, my background is originally in law, but just about most of my career, I've been working in international development with a focus geographically on different parts of the Caribbean and parts of Africa. I've been, and the focus has always been pretty much on grassroots economic development with emphasis on health, on micro enterprise development, both rural and urban. In my current position with AME SEDA for the last almost 14 years, we've been focusing on kind of what we call the roots of poverty. And it's also some of the things that we're seeing by way of trends. And the idea is trying to find not ways to alleviate poverty, not ways to make poverty better, but rather what can we do to eliminate poverty. And one of the things that we learned was in Haiti, for instance, where we had a very intensive child and maternal health project, which focused on almost 250,000 patients per year through a number of outpatient clinics, and where we did some work that was pretty well done. And I don't mean this in any kind of vain way, but just by way of even the evaluations that were done, the health part of the work was done very well. However, these patients kept on coming back year after year with the same issue until we started to ask ourselves, if we're giving the vaccinations, if we're doing the prenatals, if we're doing all of this panoply of services, why isn't this population doing any better? And it didn't take very long to figure out the root cause was poverty. If you have a mother who comes in to bring her child for vaccinations, let's say, and the mother's not eating well, the child is not eating well, let's say it's a child that's past the time for breastfeeding, and the idea is, why are we seeing this? And you start to survey, you start to talk to the patients and finding out they have no money, they have no resources to do anything better for their families. And if a mother is not doing something better for her family, you know there's a problem, because that's always 99% of the time, her main goal is doing what's needed for her family, for her children. So this kind of pointed us to focus on, we were working on with a rural community, what is it that we can do to make to give them the wherewithal to have a better life, to have a better income. So we delineated a specific area with some funding from the Kellogg Foundation, and working with a very specific target region, target population of farmers, and did a study on what is it that these farmers can do to make some money, not only today, but over a period of time, to strengthen them economically. And once we started to focus on that and getting some results, and it took us a while to develop all of that, and we're now in the second year of this activity, and just from these preliminary results, we're seeing the type of results we want to see, where the farming family has more income from farming. The farming family is able to control more of its destiny because of that. And it's going to take a while longer to be able to give the proper evidence we hope we're able to gather, to be able to demonstrate that. But the idea is to break that cycle of poverty with income from the activities that that population already knows how to do but can do better, adding processing of their agricultural production, etc. The real test is going to be when these mothers start to come to the clinics and they can actually pay something for the services rather than having to have the services for free, where we're no longer going to see mothers coming with into the malnutrition clinic with children coming back again and again for recuperation, those types of things. And on the other side, as far as how we finance this, what we're looking at is, of course, we try to diversify like everybody else, different sources, not only just USAID, but foundations, but looking at various types of European sources of funding. We're doing all of that. But one of the things that we're focusing on with our board right now is how to grow, because we're a nonprofit. And I'm sorry, I neglected to say, AME SEDA is a nonprofit, independent nonprofit that was created by the AME Church more than 40 years ago. And the AME Church continues to provide us with some funding every year, but more than 80% of our funds comes from funds that we, either fundraisings that we do or proposals that we write and partnerships that we enter into. But now the idea is that AME SEDA as a nonprofit can begin to find ways to have sources of money that are going to be continuous. And one of the things that we're looking at right now in Washington is partnerships that will allow us to become a property owner, but property income generating property. We're looking at ways to do low income property in the Washington, DC area, because housing for certain economic slice of the population is very difficult to find. So we're focusing on that population, but at the same time, not only providing them with low income housing, but having a steady source of income for the organization, which can be used as a matching with partnership that we get into, other organizations that we seek money from, so that we can ensure that we have some money down the road. And as these projects expand, at this point, we're not looking at replacing entirely other sources of money. It would be great if we could have only independent sources of funding, but it'll take a while before that happens. But at least to provide a substantial percentage of our funding for the activities that we do. So in essence, I see that my time is nearly up. So those are the two things that we're looking at, not only the work in the field, but the growth of our organization and ensuring its sources of funding for the future. And I'd be more than happy to take questions. Thank you.
Leroy, you're on mute. We can hear you if you're speaking.
Okay, sorry about that. It was Dr. Achebe, please share your comments on the public health space with us, as well as some of the other things that might be connected to public health. I know that health is the if you don't have good health, then as my wife would say, you don't have anything else. She's also an infectious diseases specialist, so we know that health, everything starts with good health or some kind of health.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be with this esteemed panel. Just to build a little bit on the introduction that Mr. Jackson gave of me, I think I come from a very conservative upbringing, and we're not used to introducing ourselves. But I would say that, you know, I'm a physician, like he said, and I have advanced training in public health and infectious disease epidemiology, like his wife. I began my career in clinical medicine and transitioned to preventive medicine, public health, when I really saw the plight of lots of my patients in Nigeria, where I started work. And I've been in public health and international development space for about 22 years. I've worked as a technical specialist and in leadership positions for several international development organizations. Like Mr. Jackson said, working with, I started off actually with Pathfinder International, worked with the UNFPA, Africa, and most recently with Save the Children. And I held positions of leadership, leading the health and HIV portfolio in Africa and the HIV and TB portfolio at SAVE and several others. In February 2020, I founded my own organization and have staff members with me now, and became the managing partner and CEO of the International Development and Relief Consulting Group, where we're providing technical support and policy support to several countries around the world. My career has given me the opportunity, like Sarah, to work all over the world. So I definitely know how it feels when you have to work with a 14-hour time difference. I actually have a meeting after this with some team members in Papua New Guinea, and it's a 14-hour difference. So I know how it feels. So I'm just going to go straight into the conversation on global health. I've been asked to speak on global health in the 21st century. And, you know, having worked from the end of the 20th century in improving health outcomes and reducing health disparities, this is really something that's very dear to me and important to the world. So let me kind of go backwards, because sometimes, you know, when you hear people talk about global health, and I'm sure in other fields in the 21st century, you know, they mumble the time. So I'll just say that the 21st century started in January 1st, 2001, and it will end in December 31st, 2100. So I'm not really going to talk about, you know, so many things that happened, be it the polio, other diseases that started in the 20th century. But one thing I think we'll all agree, regardless of what area, is that the 21st century has been marked by rising global economies, globalization, deepening global concerns over terrorism, global warming, and so many other issues. And it has also shown with globalization the interconnectivity between regions and countries. So in terms of global health, the 21st century began with the global effort to enhance health of the people. The declaration of the MDGs actually started in the year 2000, just at the end of the 20th century, but it was a 15-year goal. And one of the objectives was really to improve health, especially infectious diseases. And among the infectious diseases causing death worldwide were HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, being the topmost ones. But you also had, you know, lower respiratory tract infection, or, you know, pneumonias that were also affecting, being a big cause of death. And the MDG, the other thing it did was it acknowledged the interrelationship between health and the major determinants of health, which Robert has clearly articulated, poverty for one. And then, you know, going into still in the 21st century, we, you know, MDG was over in 2015 and came the birth of the SDG. And, it continued with the MDG agenda, but it also really focuses on achieving health equities. So, I'll just pivot a little bit from there and really talk about what I see as the major challenges that are affecting the 21st century. And there are a number of them, but, and I'll respond to them kind of simultaneously. But the first group I'll talk about are the health problems that affect life expectancies of children. And here we're really mainly talking about infectious diseases again, malaria, tuberculosis, respiratory and diarrheal diseases, as well as malnutrition. And to solve this problem, we really do need to solve the problem of health equities, because there's still a large part of the world where children are born with what, I like to call, and many other people call, the zip or postal code disease, that much greater influence on the future than one's genetic code. And that has really caused a lot of health inequities. The second group here of health problems, I would say, with the 21st century global health problems are those that affect adults. So we know the WHO has stated that by 2020, which is this year, there'll be more people that are over 60 years of age than children under 5 years. So what does aging do? Aging brings about diseases that affect the middle-aged population. So in this 21st century, we're definitely going to be impacted more with cancers, heart diseases, diabetes, mental health, and other, hypertension, other heart diseases, and so on. The third group of health problems that that are really associated with global health in this century is those associated with the environment. So we know that climate change will cause an additional 250,000 deaths a year between 2030 and 2015. That's what the data is showing us. And, so our health is closely linked to natural resources and affected by our access to water, to climate change, to temperature change, pollution. So we therefore need to really look at the relationship between natural resources and maybe the abuse of the natural resources and our health. And the fourth, group of health problems that I see associated with the 21st century as a result of the rapid evolution. And so here I'm really talking about emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases that have varying potential for global spread. So here you can really put it into the category of the epidemics and pandemics. I guess, I don't need to elaborate so much on this, because we are definitely in that situation, and that has clearly been articulated from time that this is something that is going to be one of the emerging health problems in the 21st century. So as we can see, due to the rapid evolution and broad impacts of epidemics and pandemics, they cause disruption on this global scale in a very short time. And when I say it's disruptive, I mean not just in terms of health, but epidemics and pandemics are also disruptive in terms of economy, geopolitics, security, and they also transcend borders. So let's talk about the current pandemic as an example. It has traveled and affected communities located at a distance from the origin of the problem. So, when we're dealing, the same can be said of air pollution or Ebola. So when we're looking at this health problem, we can't really look at it from a selfish perspective. A country is not in isolation. So we need to look at it from a global standpoint, because we all depend on each other. So our shared values would very much have an effect on our health problems and the solutions that we come with it. I know that I've just been told that I have 1 more minute. So I'll just say that in conclusion, the global health issue is really a foreign policy issue. And, the economic and political stability of a nation is really influenced by the general health of that nation. And so with 21st century, we'll continue to see an increasing emphasis on global health for certain. And it's something that we all need to work on and be very aware of. I know that it already has caught the policymakers, but we need to look at these 4 buckets and deal with them and put them, at the back of our minds as we move forward in the 21st century. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Achebe. Jacqueline Glin, greetings. To speak to us about gender and youth.
That is
And of
correct.
course, from all we hear, the issue, I'll say this, the engine of growth in any economy is going to be primarily female households, let's say, and the youth will need to be educated and so forth. So just 2 sectors, women and youth, they probably make up 85% of the game. If you get that taken care of, everything else is going as opposed to falling behind. Share your thoughts with us.
Certainly. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm not hearing, Leroy, I wasn't hearing you very well, so I hope everyone is able to hear me. I'll go ahead and just...
I can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and to share a little bit about my own background and experiences working on issues around health and, I'm sorry, not health, but youth and gender. First, I just want to kind of reintroduce a little bit about myself and my background. I am a global development practitioner, and I've been working in the field of development for over 20 years in progressive leadership roles. I have been living in sub-Saharan Africa for, I would say, about 15 years of my professional life. So I've had the opportunity and great privilege of working on youth issues and youth development issues on the continent, primarily in both East and West Africa, specifically Nigeria. I'm presently working in Mali, and also have done some work in Niger, Burkina Faso, and also in East Africa. So the work that I'm doing has been kind of over the past years of my life really been focused on how do we help to engage people and bring them really to the forefront so that they are able to be supported as future leaders on the continent and specifically in their countries. I am with I've spent over my lifespan a number of years with various institutions, and as you mentioned, I was with NDI, the National Democratic Institute, working to support some of our democratic programming in Somalia, and then previously in northern Kenya. But I am presently with Creative Associates International, and for the past 1 year. So it's again my privilege to be here and to share a little bit about the world as it is and as it is with young people and the role that they are have in this in trends that we're seeing with young people in this 21st century. So I'm really excited about talking about this, the role of young people as well, also with women, because they are quintessentially the most important demographic. That is uncontested, I think, simply because women are the majority of the global population. Young people are also singularly the most important demographic, because if we truly believe that they're the youth future, and they are, then we've got to treat them as the assets that they are, and for the contributions that they can bring to the future. There are a number of the issues that have been, linked to youth and youth development. Unfortunately, has not significantly increased or has not been enhanced over the past several years that I've been working in youth. Young people are still, they make up the Africa's population, and even though they are roughly 60% of the African population, the issues, as it were, with their ability to really be educated well, to be provided with opportunities to support governance, support the development of health systems, strong health systems, to support, to be employed and as entrepreneurs, are issues that are still being grappled with, decades that I've been working in this field. But here's what I know: the plight of young people, no matter how dismal it may appear, and again, because they are such a singularly important group, we are still really, again, looking at ways that we can better support them, better enhance their opportunities to sit at the table, to contribute to global issues, to contribute to the issues as it relates to their specific as issues as it relates to their specific countries. So I just want to kind of share. I don't want to harp too much on the challenges, because I think they're pretty, globally, I think they're pretty much more or less the same. But I think that because we know that they're complex and that they are fundamentally kind of more or less the same, I want to focus on kind of what we can do to help to continue to support young people, and also women as critical leaders, as critical citizens in the fight to improve the world as a world, and also to specifically support their development. I want to talk a little bit about the youth before I move on to women. A couple weeks ago, we celebrated International Youth Day, and young people were really focused on what is their role, representative role in kind of multilateral and political institutions. And again, because young people have been really known and identified as kind of critical components and critical members to their respective societies, they are asking and arguably demanding more and more to be recognized as the leaders that they can be, and for to be contributors to global and socially complex issues. So I would say that in terms of what the trend is and what our development programs continue to aim to do, as we ought to continue to do, is to really to support young people by providing them opportunities to contribute to their ideas and innovations, to the development of their communities and to the continent, as it were. Programs that I am working on specifically right now in Mali, that looks at how young people what the importance of young people as intersects with the governance and the resilience of their country and their respective communities, requires us to really also invest in their education, invest in opportunities, providing opportunities, very intentional opportunities for them to grow, for them to develop their leadership skills, and to be contributors in civic matters. So investing in those opportunities for young people, providing them with the space to contribute to their communities, is a critical kind of trend and a critical component to the work that continues to be done for young people in many of our many of our development programming. Young people also need to be involved in really determining what their own destinies are. And I say this because I think oftentimes there's the notion that young people, that adults haven't answered for how young people can be a part of decision making, or not be a part of decision making. Perhaps I think adults have an idea about how young people should participate. And what I would say is that young people have their own ideas, and again, when we give them the space to contribute, and we provide a listening ear, then we can understand that they are able to provide viable solutions to a lot of the issues that are being dealt with in their countries. And they are not, they're no longer asking to participate. They really are demanding to be a part of those solutions. And I think programming such as what I am doing in Mali and other countries that I have done is to really create opportunities and to get stakeholders involved in supporting them to be, like I said, part of the innovative solution processes to revive their economies, to be a part of, for example, what's happening in COVID-19, to be a part of addressing solutions on this global pandemic. So young people are critical components to this, and women as well. So let's talk a little bit about women. I'm not a gender expert, so I do want to put that disclaimer out there. But again, women are much like youth. We are nurturers, we are peacemakers, we are providers in many of our homes. And throughout the continent, this is definitely also the case. So programs across sectors often require that there be a very intentional way to include women as critical participants in development programs, and there's a reason for this. Again, there's almost in no single sector that women should not be in a part of the solutions, because they are invariably the ones that are going to be they're great influencers inside the homes. So again, when we look at young people and some of the issues that young people are grappling with respect to what is their place in society, should they participate in being a part of those solutions, or should they go in more nefarious routes to be a part of violent extremist activities? Women are oftentimes able and most influential members of their lives, or people in their lives, to help with young people really think through the ramifications of those decisions. So women's role role of women is really essential to our across the like I said, in key sectors, and as they relate to working with to supporting youth, they are particularly important and members of they're particularly important influencers in the development spectrum. So again, I just want to I'm going to wrap up. Okay, am I done?
Okay, go ahead. Yes. We're doing pretty good since now 8:22, and that gives us at least 8 minutes or so for field comments from the field, and maybe if there aren't that many, circle back and we can kind of get more on things that have covered in the first two. For the sake of this recording, that each of you has your bio information available on LinkedIn, so that when people review this session, if they want to get in contact with you or read more about you, they can go to LinkedIn. Your bio is your websites for your organizations, and see more updated information. There's one question so far I see here that I'd like to present to, I guess, Sarah Travis in the first instance. If the question or the comment is, in the context of all of the political uncertainty and unrest, what are the democratic and governance priorities post-COVID world? As policymakers, what do we focus on?
Yeah, thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. I think that's a really good question. And because COVID-19 has radically shifted how people organize politically, what people focus on immediately, right? I think in the past, you did see a lot of health concerns for sure, and people mobilizing around that. But people also mobilized around jobs and education and things like that in terms of larger social movements. And so I think in the post-COVID-19 world, from a democracy and governance standpoint, I think there needs to be more policies or programs around, number one, helping parties develop and implement policies that reconnect them and are responsive to citizens' evolving demands, especially in the COVID-19 reality. I also think it's important to give a bit more space to social and political movements who have seen as capturing the frustrations of citizens. So perhaps more kind of technical assistance to those organizations that are seen as effective vehicles for capturing citizen concern. I'm sure Jacqueline will have a lot more to say about this, but in terms of COVID-19 and how it's impacted marginalized communities, specifically women, right? You hear about in the news how domestic violence is on the rise in several other different countries, but just because of lockdown measures and things like that. And so I see a lot of kind of programs and policies around violence against women, programming, for example, in the post-COVID-19 era and during the COVID-19 era, leadership skills for young people, giving more space for ethnic and religious minorities to kind of politically organize and their thoughts around particular issues, especially, in the wake of George Floyd here in the States and how that's reverberated across the world. And then finally, I think it'll be important for us to help political actors prepare for political transitions and political futures, because there are a lot of citizen movements and protests that are in response to government's lack of ability to control the crisis, the pandemic. I think you'll see a lot of transition, so helping with that process as well. Leroy, I'm not sure if you're
So, sorry about that.
This thing is so every time I turn it off, it's hard to get on. And I see some comments in the about issues like if you have too many things open, the tab that may interfere with the reception or that. I think Dr. Achebe mentioned that, but I didn't see that comment because it's higher than I could see at that point. But I'm afraid to touch anything. At least I lose my link to you guys. So we're almost anyway. Just for future reference. Yeah, I guess it is a very good.
Sorry, I can't.
Can you? I hope you can hear me.
No.
Once someone else is on, can hear. Can you say it again?
Everything is reverberating all over the place, so I can't make out what you're saying. I'm sorry about that. How about now? Can you hear me now? No? Yes? Okay, good. No, I was just saying, apparently, if there are too many tabs in session, that could interfere with reception. But in my own case, I was afraid to turn to cancel out any tabs, lest I lose my link to this effort. So anyway, that's one thing. And I couldn't see the comments that were coming in of that nature on the screen because they were up higher than I was looking at on the chat. That was I see so far. I have one comment, and I don't mean to be, but just about this whole business of where do we find the money, Robert? You always hear that story about in a place like Houston, the community spends $2 billion on lottery tickets a week or something like that. So I guess we have to find the money where people spend money. So in our case, maybe you guys, the AME side of church or a union of churches or whatever, needs to have some sort of a lottery, national, just a thought, for what is worth category. And the other question I have is, a point I have is, sometimes it's problems of developing countries are so long lasting, so intractable, that is there any feasibility of just let it go? It's going to be what it's going to be, and just maybe focus helping have ways so they can make money, because you're not going to have a perfectly level playing field and transparency and maybe in our lifetimes, and maybe even it's not even culturally appropriate. People say that great, but maybe we have to go around the really nice way of doing things. Somehow let people and, as you said, Sarah Travis, use boost up the young people's initiative and ingenuity so that they can go out and make some money and do what they can do with that money. But so maybe we could have just a few more minutes of conversation if you guys are willing.
Yes, a few more minutes.
Yes.
I'm willing
Robert,
to, if I can address the first part of your question, as far as finding the money, one of the things that we've tried to do is really try to see where to go to what doors to knock on, so to speak. And one of the things that we are trying to do is to take some of this funding that the AME Church is providing us for our operations, and then looking at that housing area, so that we can ensure some future. It takes a little time. It's not overnight, but it can, from everything we've seen, it's going to pay off. The other part of your question about letting it go and see what happens, in a way, that's the approach that's how we looked at it, in the sense of what will it take to have people, the populations that we serve, have some income in there, knowing the area that they're in, the conditions that they're in, what the government is not doing locally, what the climate is not doing, whatever the conditions are. How can we, when looking at that environment, how can we make some money? And that's what we focused on. And in these particular areas, it was development of pigeon pea plantations on small plots, and everything that it would take, so that in 2 years, the farmer, that small farmer, was producing 3 to 5 times more than he or she was producing when we first arrived. The goat herder who just had a couple of goats, what did we need to do? Because in many developing countries, the goats or the small ruminants is like a small bank account. It's like a little credit card for the small farmer. When they need money, you go sell that goat to do a funeral, to baptize a child, or whatever ceremony needs to be done, or emergency is needed to pay for medical services. So that, how do we increase that herd? And that's what we focused on. Not only, and now we're looking at, now that we've increased the capacity to produce and are ensuring that production to some extent, what do we do to maximize it? How can we help that farming family do the processing post-harvest to, again, maximize? Instead of selling it to a third party who goes sell it for 3 times the money, how can we get 3 times the money in the hands of that farmer? How can that processing be done right here and there locally where that farming family lives? And that approach is starting to bear fruit.
Madame Glin, peut-être vous voulez dire quelque chose?
Merci. Oui, bien sûr. I'm not sure what additional things I can say other than it's been really a real pleasure to be a part of this esteemed panel. The work that's being done to really help transform young people's capacity to contribute to the solutions of many of these issues that we're dealing with on a global scale is massive. But the time is now, and young people are being presented, interestingly, with an opportunity through COVID-19 to really demonstrate their capacity and their desire to address issues. For example, in Mali, I'm really very pleased to see how young people were immediately online on social media to spread the accurate awareness of 19. That was for many, I think, Malians and particularly Malian leaders, a major understanding and major demonstration of what they are willing and desirous and capable of doing. And so, for example, through the program that I presently lead, we are created a lot more space for youth to do more of that, and provided an opportunity for them to kind of step into their natural entrepreneurial gifts as well, so that they are participating again. They once again participate in at the community, but also at the country level to the solutions needed to mitigate the spread of the virus. So those are kind of some lasting thoughts that I'll share on youth and women. We are the source of life and the givers of life, and hopefully we will continue to be intentionally brought into resolving some of the issues, particularly on the peace and conflict spectrum, as life continues, as the world continues to grapple with the ways to resolve those issues.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. One more.
Dr.
Achebe,
you mentioned
the
the
role
role
of the
diaspora
regarding health
services around the world. That's something that's outside
of the scope of regular formal arrangements and assistance programs. Would you care to make a few comments about that before we close out? In a sidebar conversation we had before this meeting,
yes,
you mentioned that doctors are among themselves organizing, doctors of color are organizing themselves and going around and filling in certain medical areas through some kind of informal network that you all have established.
Yes. Thank you for that. So I think, what we have seen in international development a lot is that, there's been a big role for INGOs or international development organizations to support the government. And I think, especially with George Floyd and other issues, we have also become aware that, it has been impossible for a lot of these organizations or governments to be able to provide health, especially equitable health for the whole citizens. So there has become an increasing need for other sectors to be involved, be the private sector, but also, with a lot of with globalization has also led to lots of brain drain, people from countries coming from the north coming to the south, and south coming to the north, and vice versa. And there is now this urgency and I'll say desire of a lot of diasporas to help their countries, and it's really important and critical that we tap on that resource, because they just do not have the expertise. They have not just gained the expertise from from advanced education, but they also understand the context of these countries that we all go to work in. And many times, I've been in this field like all of you for several decades, and we know that even sometimes people go with the best intentions, sometimes not with the best intentions to the countries, and there's a learning curve, and sometimes it's done wrong because we don't understand the context. So lots of the countries, the Ethiopians, the Nigerians, the Ghanaians, the diasporas are coming together now to give back to their countries. So there's a need for us in international development to look at how do we connect, and how do we build coalitions with this different groups to really be impactful in the programs we are providing on either sub-Saharan Africa or Asia, or where in low and middle income countries all over the world.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Listen, I'd like to close the session now, but before I do, I'd like to ask you if you all are seeing the text comments, the chat comments on the right side of your screen, because some people are saying hello, some people are saying I'd like to be in contact with you. I don't know if you're seeing that. If not, maybe we can figure out how to get it to you at some future date. Can you see? Are you seeing the chats, the same chats that I'm seeing? Okay, good deal. All right. Well, it's 8:40. We're not that much over time. I thank you very much for your patience and your willingness to spend this quality time with us. Good night.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you very much.